On one of the highest hilltops in Alberton County, Georgia, stands a huge granite monument, nearly 20 feet tall, weighing approximately 240,000 pounds. There are 6 stones altogether. Engraved in 8 different languages on the 4 giant stones that support the common capstone are 10 guides, or the 10 commandments. The monument is referred to as the Georgia Guidestones, or the American Stonehenge. In June 1979, a well-dressed, articulate stranger visited the office of the Alberton Granite Finishing Company and announced that he wanted to build an edifice to transmit a message to mankind. He identified himself under the pseudonym of R.C. Christian. He said that he represented a group of men who wanted to offer direction to humanity, but to date, no one knows who R.C. Christian really was or what group he represented. The message engraved on the Georgia Guidestones deal with global governance, the establishment of a world government, global depopulation, the environment and man's relationship to nature, and a new one-world spirituality. The message of the Georgia Guidestones: 1. Maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. 2. Guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. 3. Unite humanity with a living new language. 4. Rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason. 5. Protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts. 6. Let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court. 7. Avoid petty laws and useless officials. 8. Balance personal rights with social duties. 9. Prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with the infinite. 10. Be not a cancer on the earth. Leave room for nature. Leave room for nature. Limiting the population of the earth to 500 million will require the extermination, the murder, of 9/10 of the world's people. The true significance of the Georgia Guidestones is that it confirms the fact that there is an elite group whose plan involves reducing the population of the world, establishing a one-world government, and promoting a one-world spirituality. More details about the monument itself. Made of pyramid blue granite, the Georgia Guidestones are meant to withstand the test of time and to communicate knowledge on several levels: philosophically, politically, astronomically. It consists of 4 major stone blocks which contain 10 guides for living in 8 languages: English, Spanish, Swahili, Hindi, Hebrew, Arabic, Chinese, and Russian. A shorter message is inscribed at the top of the structure in 4 ancient languages scripts: Babylonian, Classical Greek, Sanskrit, and Egyptian hieroglyphics. It is important to note that those last 4 ancient languages are of a great importance in the teachings of occult mystery schools, such as the Freemasons and the Rosicrucians. This is most likely why the anonymous man chose the pseudonym R.C. Christian. The 4 major stones are arranged in a giant paddle wheel configuration, which are oriented to the limits of the migration of the sun during the course of the year, and also show the extreme positions of the rising and the setting of the sun in its 18.6-year cycle. The center stone has 2 special features. First, the North Star is always visible through a special hole drilled from the south to the north side of the center stone. Second, another slot aligns with the positions of the rising sun at the time of the summer and winter solstices, and at the equinox. At the base of the Guidestones lies an explanatory tablet listing some of the details of the structure. It also mentions a time capsule buried underneath it. The contents of this time capsule, if it exists, are a total mystery. The opening date of the time capsule has been left blank. The Rockefeller Foundation. The United Nations Population Fund, World Bank, and World Health Organization developed the Task Force on Vaccines for Fertility Regulation. Just 4 years after the Rockefeller Foundation launched massive funding operations into anti-fertility vaccines, the task force was created under auspices of the World Health Organization, World Bank, and UN Population Fund. Quote, "The task force acts as a global coordinating body for anti-fertility vaccine research and development in the various working groups and supports research on different approaches such as anti-sperm and anti-ovum vaccines and vaccines designed to neutralize the biological functions of HCG. The task force has succeeded in developing a prototype of an anti-HCG vaccine." One of the task force members, P.D. Griffin, outlined the purpose and trajectory of these fertility-regulating vaccines. Griffin stated, quote, "The task force has continued to coordinate its research activities with other vaccine development programs within WHO and with other international and national programs engaged in the development of fertility-regulating vaccines." In August of 1992, a series of meetings was held in Geneva, Switzerland regarding, quote, fertility-regulating vaccines. According to the document Fertility-Regulating Vaccines, classified by the WHO as a limited distribution, present at those meetings were scientists and clinicians from all over the globe, including then biomedical researcher of the American Agency for International Development and current research chief of USAID, Mr. Jeff Spieler. In 1986, Mr. Spieler declared, quote, "A new approach to fertility regulation is the development of vaccines directed against human substances required for reproduction. Potential candidates for immunological interference include reproductive hormones, ovum and sperm antigens, and antigens derived from embryonic or fetal tissue. Recent advances in biotechnology, particularly in the fields of molecular biology, genetic engineering, and monoclonal antibody production, are bringing anti-fertility vaccines into the realm of the feasible." Quote, "Vaccines interfering with sperm function and fertilization could be available for human testing by the early 1990s, Spieler wrote. The following quotes are from the 1977 book, Eco-Science, co-authored by John P. Holdren, Obama's science czar. The development of a long-term sterilizing capsule that could be implanted under the skin and removed when pregnancy is desired opens additional possibilities for coercive fertility control. The capsule could be implanted at puberty and might be removable, with official permission, for a limited number of births. Why should the law not be able to prevent a person from having more than 2 children? Perhaps those agencies, combined with UNEP and the United Nations Population Services, might eventually be developed into a planetary regime, sort of an international super agency for population, resources, and environment. He continues, the planetary regime might be given responsibility for determining the optimum population for the world and for each region, and for arbitrating various countries' shares within their regional limits. Control of population size might remain the responsibility of each government, but the regime would have some power to enforce the agreed limits.
First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
On leaving Microsoft, Bill Gates bought $23 million of Monsanto shares. Globally, he now promotes GMOs and a vaccines collection he calls the solution for the world. Gates has been recorded explaining this solution is actually to cut the world's population. The BBC says his foundation's funding big sterilisation programs such as this one that blasts men's scrotums with ultrasound to damage the sperm. Here Gates actually calls for the so-called death panels to decide whether folks should live or whether, as he puts it, they have no benefit whatsoever.
And a lack of willingness to say, is spending $1 million on that last 3 months of life for that patient, would it be better to see which ones actually have no benefit whatsoever? But that's called the death panel, and you're not supposed to have that discussion.
Anthony Gates actually brags he's doing God's work. The boss of Goldman Sachs said exactly the same thing while sending millions into starvation. What the heck is going on?
His father was one of the main grandfathers of the whole entire eugenics movement here inside the United States. And it's still going strong today.
My dad was head of Planned Parenthood, and it was very controversial.
In 1922, Sanger wrote a book entitled The Pivot of Civilization. In it is a chapter called The Cruelty of Charity, where she blasts programs that provide medical and nursing facilities to slum mothers as insidiously injurious. In the same book, Sanger called for the cessation of charity, for the segregation of morons, misfits, and the maladjusted, and for the sterilization of genetically inferior races. She also argued that organized attempts to help the poor was the surest sign that our civilization has bred, is breeding, and is perpetuating defectives, delinquents, and dependents. The Birth Control Review was Sanger's official publication for the American Birth Control League, and in 1932 she outlined her plan for peace.
The main objectives of the Population Congress would be to apply a stern and rigid policy of sterilization and segregation to that grade of population whose progeny is already tainted, to give certain dysgenic groups in our population their choice of segregation or sterilization, and to apportion farmlands and homesteads for these segregated persons where they would be taught to work under competent instructors for the period of their entire lives.
Sanger's admiration for the eugenics programs of Nazi Germany were well known at the time. In 1933, the Birth Control Review published Eugenic Sterilization, an Urgent Need, by Ernst Rudin, who was Hitler's director of genetic sterilization and the founder of the Nazi Society for Racial Hygiene. In her praise for the eugenics programs in Germany, Sanger called for the implementation of such programs in the United States, specifically targeting African Americans.
No one told me. I never even knew.
She had been sterilized, targeted by a state board that ordered that this kind of surgery be performed on thousands of North Carolinians from 1929 all the way to 1974. 7,600 men, women, and children determined by social workers to be feeble-minded or promiscuous were sterilized, usually without their consent, and it was perfectly legal.
Little boys, they would castrate them. Little girls, they would go inside them and take out their organs.
State Representative Larry Womble.
Why would they want to do that to a young girl?
Why did they?
Well, they had several reasons they thought were valid at that time.
Their reasons were based on a scientific theory called eugenics, which became popular in the 1920s. Eugenicists believed that poverty, promiscuity, and alcoholism were inherited traits. It was a simple theory with a radical solution: sterilize those the state would have to take care of and improve society's gene pool. Some of America's wealthiest citizens of the time were eugenicists. Dr. Clarence Gamble of the Procter & Gamble fortune and James Haynes of the Hosiery Company founded the Human Betterment League, which produced brochures like these, stoking fears of, quote, morons mixing with the general population.
Representative, when you look back, was this a well-intentioned idea with the best science at the time that then just went awry?
I don't know if that was the best intention to weed out negative things in our society. You're playing God over a whole group of people's lives, and I don't think we're supposed to play God like that.
Because that's what he says. If we do a good enough job with vaccinations and everything, we'll be able to reduce the population. The polio vaccines now are the #1 cause of polio. There's no question that Bill Gates is not doing God's work. And if he is doing God's work, I would ask which God?
The benefits there in terms of reducing sickness, reducing the population growth, it really allows the society a chance to take care of itself.
CDC patent number CA2741523A1. Ebola. Operating out of South Africa during the apartheid era in the early 1980s, Dr. Walter Bassan launched a secret bioweapons project called Project Coast. The goal of the project was to develop biological and chemical agents that would either kill or sterilize the black population and assassinate political enemies. Among the agents developed were Marburg and Ebola viruses. Bioweapons expert Jean Gulliman writes in her book Biological Weapons: From the Invention of State-Sponsored Programs to Contemporary Bioterrorism, quote, "The project's growth years were from 1982 to 1987, when it developed a range of biological agents, such as those for anthrax, cholera, and the Marburg and Ebola viruses, and for botulinum toxin." Bassan claims to have had contact with Western agencies that provided ideological assistance to Project Coast. Bassan stated in an interview shot for the documentary Anthrax War that he had met several times with Dr. David Kelly, the infamous UN weapons inspector in Iraq. Kelly was a top bioweapons expert in the United Kingdom. He was found dead near his home in Oxfordshire in 2003. The official story claims that he committed suicide. A week prior to his death, Dr. Kelly was to be interviewed by MI5 about his ties to Dr. Bassan. Dr. Timothy Stamps, Minister of Health of Zimbabwe, suspected that his country was under biological attack during the time that Bassan was operating. Stamps told PBS Frontline in 1998 that, quote, "The evidence is very clear that these were not natural events. Whether they were caused by some direct or deliberate inoculation or not is the question we have to answer." Stamps specifically named the Ebola and Marburg viruses as suspect. Stamps thinks that his country was being used as a testing ground for weaponized Ebola. President Obama's new Ebola czar, Ron Klain. When asked what was the greatest threat facing our world today, Ron Klain replied,
"The top leadership issue challenging our world today is how to deal with a continuing growing population in the world."
The World Health Organization said today that by December 1st, the region could see 5,000 to 10,000 new cases every week.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
The first General Director of the United Nations Educational, Science and Culture Organization, UNESCO, Fabian socialist and secular humanist Julian Huxley, brother of Aldous Huxley, stated, "The task is to help the emergence of a single world culture."
Now we can see a new world coming into view. A world in which there is the very real prospect of a new world order. A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
It was a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order.
At the end of the Cold War, Henry Kissinger pointed out in his superb book on diplomacy, he said, "None of the most important countries which must build a new world order."
And this present window of opportunity during which a truly peaceful and interdependent world order might be built.
And the hope that each of us has to build a new world order.
2009 is also the first year of global governance with the establishment of the G20 in the middle of the financial crisis. The climate conference in Copenhagen is another step towards the global management of our planet.
It's about the future of the whole region. It's about the future of Europe and a new world order.
The transatlantic partnership was never just the foundation of our security. It was the foundation of our way of life. It was forged in experience of the most bitter and anguished kind. Out of it came a new Europe, a new world order.
I think a new world order is emerging, and with it the foundations of a new and progressive era of international cooperation.
So you really need to bring China into the creation of a new world order.
I think his task will be to develop an overall strategy for America in this period when really a new world order can be created. It's a great opportunity.
Your class has an incredible window of opportunity to lead in shaping a new world order.
We meet here at a moment of testing for Europe and the United States, and for the international order that we have worked for generations to build.
What do you think America's place in the new world order should be? It's always been seen as the global policeman. What should America be doing
I think
globally?
The global policeman should be the United Nations.
A total population of 250 to 300 million people, a 95% decline from present levels, would be ideal. Ted Turner, founder of CNN.